You look up at the sky every day. Millions of people do. But what if one day you saw something you couldn't explain? In 1947, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold saw 9 bright objects flying near Mount Rainier. He described their movement as like a saucer skipping across water. The press misquoted him. They said the objects were shaped like saucers. The term flying saucer was born from a misunderstanding. But this story isn't really about spacecraft. It's about something much closer to home. It's about how the sky changed in the 20th century and how humans started seeing their own fear. On April 14th, 1561, the people of Nuremberg woke to something impossible. At dawn, hundreds of shapes filled the sky above the city. Spheres, cylinders, crosses. They appeared to move and collide above the rooftops for nearly an hour. Some of them seemed to crash to the ground in clouds of smoke. The event terrified the city. Church bells rang. People fell to their knees in the streets. An artist named Hans Glaser was there. He recorded the event in a woodcut broadsheet, printed and sold across the city. It showed dozens of strange objects floating above church steeples and tiled rooftops. People in the streets pointing upward, frozen in awe. It's one of the earliest illustrated records of a mass aerial phenomenon. It was almost certainly a natural atmospheric event. Light bending through ice crystals can create bright spots and rings in the sky. Scientists today call them sundogs or parhelia. But the people of Nuremberg didn't have that word. They saw what they understood, a sign from God. For most of human history, this was how people explained the unexplained. Comets were warnings from heaven. Bright lights were messages from the gods. Strange shapes in the clouds were battles between angels and demons. In ancient Rome, soldiers saw glowing shields hovering over battlefields. In medieval Japan, monks described wheels of fire rolling across the night sky. Both were looking at something they couldn't name. The heavens, every culture found meaning in the sky above them. The sky was a mirror. Nobody questioned what they saw. They questioned what it meant. In the 1890s, Americans reported strange airships crossing the night sky. Witnesses described cigar-shaped craft with bright lights, moving slowly overhead. Newspapers published the reports on their front pages. People explained them as secret inventors testing flying machines. And the sky stopped being empty. Before technology could watch the sky belonged to myth. Then came World War II, and everything changed. For the first time in history, trained military pilots flew at high altitude through the night. They were exhausted, alert, scanning the darkness for threats. The cockpit was cold, the engines hummed, the sky stretched out in every direction. Radar was new. It could detect aircraft, but it couldn't always explain what it detected. And sometimes the machines picked up things the operators couldn't explain. And the machines saw things too. Starting in 1944, pilots began reporting something strange. Glowing orbs of light followed their aircraft through the dark. Some pilots thought the lights were reflections on the canopy glass. Others figured they were hallucinating from exhaustion. But the reports kept coming in from different squadrons, different theaters. The objects matched their speed exactly. They flew in formation, sometimes just off the wingtip, but they never attacked. The name stuck. Nobody had a better one. The name stuck. The explanation didn't. Both Allied and Axis forces suspected secret enemy weapons. The Americans thought they were German. The Germans thought they were American. After the war ended, Intelligence teams searched through captured documents. Neither side had built them. These weren't farmers telling stories around a fire. These were military professionals in combat, filing official reports, and nobody could explain what they saw. 3 years later, June 24th, 1947, pilot Kenneth Arnold was flying his small plane near Mount Rainier in Washington state. The sky was clear. Visibility was perfect. He spotted 9 bright metallic objects moving at extreme speed across the mountain range. They moved in a chain, dipping and climbing between the peaks. He described a movement. The world saw a shape. Arnold estimated their speed at over 1,200 miles per hour. No aircraft in 1947 could fly that fast. Arnold knew that. And that's the strange part of this story. The facts didn't matter. The image did. Within days, his story was on the front page of every newspaper in the country. Hundreds of people started reporting similar sightings. The phenomenon spread like wildfire. When Arnold landed, reporters asked him what the objects looked like. He described how they moved, like a saucer skipping across water. He was describing their motion, not their shape, but newspapers printed the words flying saucer. And that image, a disc-shaped craft from space, became fixed in the public imagination. One misquote, that's all it took. And for the next 70 years, people expected to see discs. And that's the thing about this story. Once people had an image in their heads, they kept seeing it. Metallic fragments, thin beams, material he'd never seen before. The Roswell Army Airfield made an announcement. They had recovered a flying disc. That contradiction stayed with people. Imagine reading the newspaper that morning, flying disc recovered, then waking up the next day and being told it never happened. For a lot of Americans, that was the moment trust started to crack. Just a weather balloon, they said. Announce, then retract. That pattern planted a seed that would grow for decades. The real explanation came much later. The debris was from Project Mogul, a top-secret military program using high-altitude balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. The balloons carried reflective targets and sensors that looked nothing like conventional aircraft parts. The government couldn't reveal that in 1947. The Cold War had just begun. Nuclear secrecy was absolute. So they said weather balloon. After that, a lot of people just stopped believing anything the military said about the sky. The Air Force created Project Blue Book to investigate UFO reports systematically. It ran for 17 years, 12,618 reports in total. Analysts examined photographs, radar data, pilot testimony. It was the first time the military tried to make the subject sound boring on purpose. They explained most of them: bright planets, weather balloons, aircraft lights, a few deliberate hoaxes. An Air Force officer named Edward Ruppelt led the project. He coined the term UFO to replace flying saucer with something more neutral. And when Blue Book ended, hundreds of cases were still sitting there without clear answers. 701 files sitting in a cabinet with no explanation attached. One of the most dramatic moments came in 1952. Unidentified objects appeared on radar over Washington, D.C. 2 weekends in a row. Fighter jets were scrambled. The objects vanished from radar before the jets arrived. The incident made headlines worldwide. The Air Force held its largest press conference since World War II. Ironically, some of the most advanced military aircraft in history were causing more UFO reports than anything else. His job was to debunk, to find ordinary explanations for extraordinary claims. He was good at it. For years, he dismissed most reports as stars, planets, or aircraft. But some cases bothered him, the ones with multiple witnesses, radar confirmation, trained observers. The planes that were supposed to be invisible were generating more UFO reports than anything else in the sky. By the time Blue Book ended, Hynek was no longer a skeptic. The man they'd hired to explain it all away found that he couldn't, not all of it. In 1969, a university report concluded that UFO research had no scientific value. Project Blue Book was shut down. The Air Force said no UFO had ever threatened national security. The government stopped talking. But when the government stops talking, something else happens. Area 51, a real Air Force testing facility in the Nevada desert. Restricted airspace, guard posts, miles of nothing. The less the government said, the more people imagined. When a government goes quiet about something, people notice and they start guessing. The government created a vacuum, and culture filled it with every fear it had. The U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, the F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter. These aircraft flew at extreme altitudes with angular, unfamiliar shapes. They were classified. Nobody on the ground knew they existed. The F-117 flew secretly from Area 51 for years before the public ever saw it. Its flat, angular shape against the night sky didn't look like any aircraft people had seen. To someone on the ground looking up, it didn't look like any aircraft ever built. Here's the problem. And when nobody explains what you saw, you start making up your own explanation. If they confirmed the F-117 existed, they'd lose their strategic advantage. For decades, that seemed like the end of the story. It wasn't. So they said nothing. And when the government says nothing, people fill the silence with whatever scares them most. People reported triangular craft over Belgium in 1989 and 90. The Belgian Air Force scrambled jets, their radar locked onto objects that accelerated beyond anything known. Was it a stealth aircraft test? A sensor error? Nobody confirmed, nobody denied. Meanwhile, UFOs became entertainment. Close Encounters of the Third Kind in '77. Different decades, different shapes, same unease. The X-Files ran for 9 seasons, starting in '93. Every decade had its own version. In the '50s, UFOs were Soviet weapons. By the '90s, they were government cover-ups. The details changed, but the feeling underneath stayed the same. A French astronomer named Jacques Vallée asked a different question. Not, what are UFOs? Whatever people see up there, it tends to match whatever they were already worried about. Vallée was a computer scientist and an astrophysicist. He studied reports across centuries and found patterns that matched ancient folklore. The shapes changed over time. Airships, discs, glowing orbs, triangles. But the human response never really changed. Whatever is up there, we keep seeing what we're already afraid of. In 2007, deep inside the Pentagon, someone created a new program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Type, budget, $22 million. It was run by a former intelligence officer named Luis Elizondo. Almost nobody knew it existed. 10 years later, in December 2017, the New York Times published a story. They revealed a tip, and they released footage recorded by Navy fighter pilots. 3 videos, FLIR, gimbal, go fast. The footage showed objects with no visible wings and no exhaust. They changed direction instantly. They accelerated beyond anything known. Trained Navy pilots couldn't explain what they'd recorded. The most famous encounter had actually happened years earlier, in 2004. Navy Commander David Fravor was flying off the USS Nimitz near San Diego. He saw a white oval object hovering above the ocean. It had no wings, no exhaust. When he descended toward it, the object accelerated and vanished in seconds. Fravor said it was unlike anything he'd seen in his career, and he'd been flying for 18 years. The language shifted. The government stopped using the word UFO, a term loaded with 70 years of alien movies and conspiracy theories. They replaced it with UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena. This wasn't just a new name. It was the government saying, "We're taking this seriously now." A signal that the subject could finally be discussed seriously. In 2022, Congress held the first public hearing on unidentified aerial phenomena in over 50 years. Military officials testified under oath about encounters they could not explain. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office was established inside the Pentagon. In 2023, a former intelligence officer named David Grush testified before Congress. He claimed the government had recovered non-human craft. The Pentagon denied it. The debate is still open, but here's what actually changed. The United States military admitted something it had denied for decades. Maybe the strangest thing about UFOs isn't what people saw. Maybe it's that every generation looked into the same sky and saw something completely different. And maybe that says less about what's up there and more about what we fear down here. Next time you look up at the night sky, think about this. Maybe the strangest thing about UFOs isn't what people saw. Maybe it's how every generation looked into the same sky and found a different version of itself looking back. Comets, angels, enemy weapons, alien visitors, government secrets, all of it up there, waiting to be named. If you want to discover more hidden stories behind the things that shaped our world, subscribe to History of Things.